Well, hello, you guys, and happy Sunday. Doing things a little bit different today. I'm out here by the fire pit, and thought I might just show how the sausage eats made a little bit behind this video. Me and Annie. Say hi, Annie. Me and Annie are out here, and there we go. I'm back. Been a great weekend. Went down to Owen County to Mom and Dad's farm with some of my old college and law school buddies, and had just a great time turkey hunting and fishing and camping out in the rain and all that stuff. And I got home and I was so hooked on the outdoors, I had to come out here and shoot this one by the fire. So Annie and I came down and bundled up some sticks and got it going. Hope you guys are well. This has been nutty. I don't know how you guys are doing. I hope you're doing great. We're doing well. You know, we've got one of those households that's a big family, so it's pretty easy. we don't really sense the loss of community like so many people are. And one of my confessions is I'm a major news junkie. Like I'm addicted to like Fox News and Ink Free News and whatever else. I just want what's going on in the world. And one of the things that seems to come up more and more is just how many people are really hurting through this strange time. There's a lot of lonely people out there, and some of those are in our church. And so, to those of you who are feeling alone and kind of hurting through this, know that we love you. And I hope that we'll get better about loving on you, because we need to. Talked to my mom today, and she was talking about going by to see Terry and just dropping off some stuff. And when the gal in the nursing home came out, she was just thrilled to death to see somebody standing at the door. Sounds like not a lot of people are doing that. That was really cool. I'm thinking about John 14. And last 2 weeks I've wrestled with this. I wrestle with this gospel, with this chapter in particular, because I think the idea that somebody came along and put chapter and verse to the Bible was a good idea, because it helps us as community to quote things. But it also makes it seem like there's something happening like in isolation. Like there's something we're supposed to catch in this chapter, and that's what this chapter is about. And if there was ever a chapter that did not lend itself to that in the whole Bible, it's John 14. Because it's Jesus coaching those incredibly human young men in the last couple of days of his life about what life was going to look like afterward. And as we've commented on over and over again, they don't get it. But he's pouring himself into them. But today, the verse I want to start with, not sure where we're gonna end, but the verse I want to start with is chapter 14, verse 12. And this is not flyover country. You know, if you're on an airplane headed from Indy to Denver and you're headed over Nebraska or Kansas, and you look at some of those places and you're like, you can just forget this spot. This is just somewhere along the way. I think you're going to agree this isn't flyover space. John wrote, quoting Jesus, "Very truly," Jesus said, "I tell you, whoever believes in me will do the works I have been doing, and they will do even greater than these, because I'm going to the Father. And whatever you ask in my name, so that the Father may be glorified in the Son, I will do." You may ask me for anything in my name, and I will do it. Sorry, by the way, about the heavy breathing behind me. That's Annie. How can we not stop right there? Pause like the button on life right there and just stop and ask, what did I just hear? What did he just say? He said, whoever believes in me will not just do the works I have been doing, but they will do even greater things than these, because I'm going to the Father. And there's something so cool about that connection. You know, that it's not just, he doesn't just make a blanket promise. He says there's a reason that something special is about to happen in the life of his followers, then and now, but for a reason, because he's going to the Father. And that's mysterious. Now, he gets to that a little bit later, and I think helps us to understand why him going to the Father makes a promise like that so incredible. But linger on the promise. Because he says, and I will do whatever you ask in my name. I think probably that's the tough part. Because maybe I'm not the first guy in a church that asked to win the lottery. That probably didn't come from Jesus' name. That probably didn't have something to do with his ministry, his work, his purpose. To love and to live into the light of people. That's a whole different sermon. But that little catchphrase at the end, whatever you ask for me, I'll do when you ask it in my name, I think is a huge life lesson for us. There have been so many times I've made demands upon God, even claiming the name of Christ in doing it, because I just knew that this issue or that issue or this thing I needed or thought I needed or wanted was so important that it must be true, and was disappointed that Jesus let me down, because he just told me, I'll do anything you ask. I'll take it to Father. I'll take it to Papa. It'll be done. Ask it in my name, it'll be done. I think the part that I'm still trying to figure out is, what's it really mean? Gosh, and I bet you guys are with me. What's it mean and look like and feel like and live like to ask Jesus to do something impossible, even greater things than he, but to do it in his name? Because right here we have this promise from the Lord of Heaven that says you may ask anything, and I'll do it. It'll be done. So Jesus opens these verses with a stunning promise, a proclamation that seems frankly impossible. I've already explained just one little second of my own life story about how, I've asked stuff before, but it just doesn't always seem to happen. And I think you'll all agree with me that I don't think it's just asking the right things in the right way. Because I think when he says, you, my followers, will do even greater things than I've been doing, I think there's worthiness in that promise. There's faithfulness in that declaration. That when we get it, it's like, holy cow. She's back, by the way, and panting heavily. There she is. Hey, Annie, say hi again. She's shy. She's camera shy. But imagine Okay, I think it just hit like an emergency thing on my phone. Imagine the conversations that the disciples must have had about that. I mean, about so much of what Jesus said. But man, I when I hear and when I stop a minute, because it really does. For 1 second in our souls, we treat that passage like a little flyover. But I bet they didn't. They heard that promise and they must have remembered it. They didn't remember it on Friday. They didn't remember it on when Jesus was crucified. Certainly not on Saturday when they're running for their lives and trying to figure out what they do next. And on Sunday, the resurrection, they weren't thinking about anything but the resurrection. But in those days that he spent with them afterward, and even beyond that, especially as we open up to Acts chapter 1, we see them gathered in a room, now pretty committed to something different. Committed to the idea that, you know what, he was telling us a lot of stuff all along, and it came true. And that means something different for us. I wonder if they came back to this conversation and thought, do you hear that promise he made? That whoever believes in me will do not just will do the works I've been doing, and they've seen him do crazy stuff. But he says, they'll not just do, you won't just do, but they'll do the works I was doing and even greater. And it must have been like, did he really say that? What's that mean? We're going to do greater things? What could that mean? Well, he walked on water. What could be more amazing than that? He turned water into wine. He healed the blind. He touched a lame person and made them walk. He gave sight to the unseeing, gave peace to the hurting in physical, tangible, visible ways. What can it mean? Does it mean we're going to do like that stuff, but like better? They had to have that conversation. Now, to be sure, and you guys know this story, but to be sure, the era of the early church was a season marked with great signs and miracles, especially among the apostles. In fact, when we read Acts chapter 2, it talks about how the church was amazed at the signs and wonders of the apostles. I mean, they're doing that stuff. But I think we can be very confident that in making this promise to them and to us, that for those who believe in him will continue to do his works and do even greater things than these, that he wasn't talking about the spectacular stuff. He wasn't talking about the supernatural. He wasn't talking about the amazing. I think I just tripped over my own tongue, because he was. He was talking about something spectacular and amazing and supernatural indeed, but it wasn't primarily the outward, visibly observant stuff that we, like the disciples, must have wondered about. Oh, we're going to walk on water. We're going to heal people. There's going to be some kind of power in us that gives us the ability to change biologically and sometimes geographically, change the nature of the world through the intervention of God through our bodies. They must have been thinking that, and that happened. But I think over the course of a short period of time, they began to understand, no, what he meant was something different and something better. His message, that promise that exists and lives and is extended today, it was not primarily meant to suggest that the followers of Christ would do more visibly spectacular things than Jesus did. Because the fact of the matter, nothing can be more spectacular than the things that he did. But if we look at his promise in the larger context of God's plan of redemption. Because that's what's going on here, right, you guys? That's its context. I mean, the context in which Jesus speaks these words, it's God's plan of redemption. And if we look at it in that larger picture, what we see is that the works that the disciples did were not more eye-popping supernatural than what Jesus did. They were instead greater in extent, in their reach, in the breadth of what happened because of what God did to them when he brought his son home to sit next to him at his right hand in heaven. And we've not even come to that part of this chapter that's rich and heavy and life-giving, that explains that. As Jesus said, when I go, we're going to send the Comforter. We're going to send a helper. We're going to send somebody to you that's going to change everything. But his promise was real. And it happened. What they did was in fact greater. Not because of them. He was doing it through the Spirit, through the Father, through a power that wasn't their own. But it happened. It became greater, became bigger. The works that the disciples did and the works that Jesus' disciples are doing today were better in the way that Jesus meant it. For one, geographically. One historian talking about this aspect of the ministry of the ones that Jesus left behind to take up the mantle of the cross and carry it forward had a great quote, and I forget his name, but he said it this way. He said, think of what Jesus, in the days of his flesh, had actually done. He had never preached outside Palestine. Within his lifetime, Europe had never heard the gospel. He had never personally met the moral degradation of a city like Rome or cities like that. His world was small. But his disciples spread the gospel around the globe. And by the way, if you're sitting there kind of new to this whole Bible stuff and the story of Christianity, that last statement, that his disciples spread the gospel around the globe, that didn't happen in 3,000 years. That gospel spread to the known, developed world in their lifetimes. It's crazy. And they were up against every possible obstacle. The dumbest thing they ever did was follow Jesus, because it meant their lives were on the line. It meant that they were ridiculed, they were embarrassed and humiliated, but they didn't care. They cared on Saturday. They didn't like it one little bit. Saturday was hell, in a certain manner of speaking, for them. But on and after Sunday, that promise started coming true, lickety-split. Something happened in those men that gave them a power that did even greater things than these. And you think about it, what they did was greater even, not just geographically, but ethnically. Jesus ministered to Jews. And that was the Father's plan during his earthly ministry. But his disciples, they started preaching the gospel, especially Paul, as you'll remember, the apostle to the Gentiles. They preached it far and wide, across racial and ethnic bounds, to fulfill another promise that Jesus made, that there will be neither Greek nor Jew, male nor female. We're all one. And those disciples started to make that a reality, a living, looking, real life reality. And of course, what they did and the empowerment of the Holy Spirit was greater numerically. Think about the book of Acts. I mean, if if you had to pick a chapter in the Bible where the biggest change ever happens, I don't know if you can, but we'll do this one for a second. You got to look at Acts 1 and 2. Because when the book of Acts begins, we have a few dozen, maybe a few dozen believers meeting in a room. By chapter 2, in one speech, by one guy that people think he's drunk or crazy, 3,000 members are added to the church. And what Jesus left behind for his disciples to do was greater spiritually as well. William Barclay, a guy I often cite, and he's one of the guys whose commentaries I lean on hard, because I think he gets a lot of what's going on biblically. But when it comes to the spiritual legacy that Jesus left for his disciples to carry on, he said this. He said, the triumphs of the message of the cross were even greater than the triumphs of Jesus in the days in his own flesh. Jesus may have raised the physical dead, because remember Lazarus, but the disciples were able to witness the spiritually dead come to life. Do you guys realize that power that you and I possess today? That we read a story like Jesus walking outside that tomb of his dead friend who'd been laying there for 3 days and was already starting to stink. And he said, Lazarus, come forth. And a dead man stood and walked out of that tomb. Imagine that. And we think that's so fantastic, it's almost like a fairy tale. And in the next breath, and quite literally within a week, Jesus says to his disciples, remember that? You'll do more. He's talking about you and me, you guys. Tomorrow's Monday, and you're going to go to work, and you're going to see people, and you're going to see people who are struggling. You're going to see people who are starting to feel the weight of this thing. I am. And by the way, I am. And I didn't think I would, because I'm one of those introverts that's like, hey, give me solitude, give me quarantine. I can live with that for a long time. But man, even me, I'm struggling with this. But tomorrow, you guys, you and I are going to, and by the way, I don't know where my face is right now because I'm looking at a couple of notes I made, so that maybe the video camera's off. Hope that maybe that helps. But tomorrow we're going to go to the office. We're going to go to the factory. We're getting our trucks and drive down the road and do the things that we do that matter. But let's remember that incredible promise and the power in that promise, that just as Barclay said, you know what, Jesus may have had a little edge on us when it came to calling physically dead people up out of a tomb. But what he left with us was something even better. And that's the power to deliver a message that can raise a spiritually, eternally rejected and tormented soul. You know that person. You've probably got a name forming for that person right now. Living high and large, thinking everything's going great, but dead and living apart from God. And you and I have been granted this promise and power of being able to speak life eternally shifting life into that person. And to be real honest with you guys, we're going to, one of these days, real soon, we're going to come out of this thing. We're going to be back to normal, doing church, doing life, hugging and shaking hands and swapping spit. I don't know where that came up with, by the way. I did just come back from a turkey hunt with my old buddies, so it probably came from those guys because they're a little seedier, more down home than I am. But we're going to come back and start living again. We need more gospel stories, you guys. Because they're ready and waiting. Remember what Jesus said, the harvest is plentiful. But he needs people to tell it. And I don't know about you, but I'm sick and tired of trying to convince people that they're morally wrong. And I'm definitely sick and tired of trying to convince people that they're politically wrong. I had a couple of those this week. That's just dumb. Because what people need to know is that there's something spiritually wrong. And it's not a moral problem. I mean, at some level it is, because it's just sin. But it's not just a moral problem. It's a walk with God problem. It's a where you stand in eternity problem. And you and I possess this. It's not even just a power. It is. Coming through the promise of Jesus in John chapter 14. But it's so simple. We've been given a tool. Because, Jesus never told us to convince anybody about anything. He said, just tell them my story. Just tell them about me. Because there's power. There's power in my name. There's power in my blood. There's power in this message. The gospel. That I came and I lived and I died on a cross to purchase you out of hell. To buy you back into a right walk with God. I kind of like that. Man, I like that a lot. I'm just kind of sitting here right now, sifting through what that means for me. Do you ever do that? Sifting through what the gospel really means to you. It's the most beautiful thing. You guys know that? It's the most beautiful thing that ever happened to you. And then we just do church. We make rules. We get in step. We get in line. We do all these religious things. But at the end of the day, the only thing that really matters to you and me is what the gospel has done to us and what it's still doing. And I think that today, if there's a message on my heart, and by the way, there was tons more about ready to happen in this message, but I got sidetracked on something I think really important. Which means it's not a sidetrack. Jesus died for you and for me. But right before he did, he said, I'm going to give you something. I'm going to possess you with the privilege of an unspeakably powerful gift. And it's your mouth, and it's your eyes, and your ears, and a life to live out, to see, to speak, to smell it out. The gospel. That's who you are now. I think his promise wasn't just a promise, it was a challenge, an invitation to join in something he's doing, to join in something he's doing in the world. And let's be honest, We've been terrible at it. But maybe not tomorrow. Here I go again, preaching to myself. And you guys just get to listen. Because I'm certainly not coming down on you. The Word of God's coming down on me. It's hitting me. Right in the old gizzard. I love you guys. Man, I've missed you. Can't wait to see you. I really can't. Let's pray. Jesus, you are you're elusive to us, frankly, Christ. Because I think what we want to see in you and to gain from you and to learn from you is the stuff that makes the journey easy. We love, for instance, Jesus, we love any hint of an invitation that says, hey, ask this in my name and I'll make your life easier. Because that's what we hear in John 14, but that's not what you're promising. Jesus, help us to abide in you and to live like you and for you, to make you the center of what we get up to do each day, to make you a topic on our conversation, Jesus. Make you the topic of our conversation, because we stink at that. Your name escapes our lips far too rarely. And yet you're gracious, and you're patient, and you love us. That's what makes you, one of the things that makes you so cool, so great, so wonderful, so worth loving. Jesus, protect this family that I share with today remotely. Thanks for the fire. Thanks for the heavy breathing dog that sometimes sits right next to me. And thanks for the friends that are watching right now. Bless them. Give them not just the words to speak tomorrow when the dawn sets on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, but give them the courage to speak that name, Jesus.